All right, here we go, January 1st, and I am going to start the journey of reading, oh gosh, this book, The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. It's a giant book, so it's going to take me a long time, so I thought that I would vlog it. So I will do, I don't know, maybe weekly updates or something about my progress. And I am buddy reading this with Monique Chambers, so I will link to her channel in the description of this video. So, all right, here we go. All right, hello again. It is January 2nd and a quick update in my reading of The Way of Kings. So far I've made it through both prologues. I guess he calls the first one a prelude to the entire series, prelude to the Stormlight Archive, and then we've got the prologue to the actual book, The Way of Kings. So I just need to start out with saying I'm going to love this book. I love epic fantasy, easy sell. Like, we're good. I love maps. I love a ton of new place names. I love new magic systems. Like, I am all in. But the second prologue, the prologue to The Way of Kings, is like a little bit sloggy. So the prelude to the whole series, I absolutely loved. I thought it was great. I thought it struck the nice balance between introducing enough detail to like give us kind of a sense of the outlines of the world that Sanderson is creating without like just totally bogging us down. And giving us kind of like an emotional sense of where the series is headed. I thought it was fantastic. So for anybody who needs a reminder, I'm assuming anybody who's watching this video has already read this book, but the prelude is Kalak and Jezrien are kind of talking on the battlefield after the desolation and have decided to break the oath pact. It's very short. It's only 4 pages and plus a few lines. And so I actually tallied things because I'm a huge nerd. So in this prelude, on page 1, Sanderson only mentions kind of 5 like new terms or like weird names, right? Things that would kind of stick in the mind of a modern reader of like, yeah, this isn't my world. And then in the entire prelude, which is, like I said, 4 pages plus a few lines, it's like 9 plus the original 5. So it's 14 kind of names and terms and concepts total. And I actually think I might be undercounting, especially when we get to the next prologue, because I was really mostly just counting capitalized words that aren't kind of in our world. So like that's not too bad. And yeah, like I said, it gives you like an emotional lead into the story without overwhelming you with detail. Then the next prologue. It's like, okay, I like this character. I don't know if it's supposed to be pronounced Seth. I used to speak a tiny bit of Polish, so I see that name and my brain says Szeth with the SC. And I could even be remembering my Polish pronunciation wrong. But anyway, I say Szeth in my head, whether it's Szeth or Seth. So like, yeah, he's a compelling character. We're getting some of his tension and conflict like right off the bat. Like I want to know more about him. I want to know who he is. I want to know where he came from. I want to know what he did after the prologue. Like what the heck happened, and who is this guy? Like absolutely, the hook has been set, right? But like it's a bit of a slog for a prologue, the amount of stuff you have to learn. So just to compare, so on the first page of that prologue where we get the scene of Seth or Sheth assassinating the king, we have 6 new terms compared to 4 terms in the prelude that I really liked. Okay, 6 new terms isn't that bad, but then in just the first 4 pages we have 21 new terms compared to the 14 in the prelude. So like that's a lot for a new reader. And then Sanderson adds another 9 terms, and again I'm underestimating because I'm really just talking about like names of things, like the fierce bren and the shard blades, a lashing, as opposed to some of the other like more nebulous concepts that are introduced. So it's a lot of new information for a prologue. This might just be me, but it's like with epic fantasy, I like the slow start, I guess, where we kind of discover the world in a way along with the main character. So the example standing out to me is Robert Jordan, and like of course there's writing problems with him too, but his whole series just starts out to me I think perfectly, because we get kind of a prologue with Luz Theron that kind of sets up some of the like great titanic struggle in the world, just like the first prelude here with Kalak and Jezrien. And then in the first chapters of Eye of the World, we just get like this little farm boy in the woods. And so I'm like, oh, I know woods. Like, yes, woods are creepy. Absolutely, I'm there. Shadowy figures in the woods are creepy. I'm there. And like, it just builds, right? It's not 21 new words that are made up for this book in a short number of pages thrown at you. So people might hate me now. I'm over it. That's okay. We can argue. It's fine. Like I said in the very beginning, I'm going to love this book, and Sanderson is a good writer. But those 21 terms, that's a lot in a prologue. And then I also just have a couple other comments so that are just like so nitpicky. So I'm sorry to anybody who's watching this. But so on page 13 of the prologue to The Way of Kings, so Seth has just taken a great big breath and is holding on to Stormlight, and he's saying, it leaked away, the human body too porous a container. He had heard that the Voidbringers could hold it in perfectly. But then, did they even exist? His punishment declared that they didn't. His honor demanded that they did. That last sentence has no context in this prologue, unless I'm being an idiot reader, which is entirely possible. We all have our moments. But it literally doesn't, like, we don't have any context for him having a punishment or him even being of a people where honor is really important necessarily. Like it just really stood out to me in my brain as like, where did that even come from? Like that doesn't make sense to me given the little bit that I know of this character. So I flagged it as like something to hold on to and see if it's explained more later as I get to know this character more. So that's possible, but just if I were going through this as a Word document with track changes, I would have been like, rewrite that sentence, please. Thank you. And then another one that, you know, again, this could be me reading, and I'm sure will probably be explained later, but Seth is musing on the fact that he realized he's going to, well, he already knew he was going to need to kill the king, but he's faced with his first guards that he needs to kill. So he's saying, to kill, it was the greatest of sins, and yet here Seth stood, truthless, profanely walking on stones used for building, and it would not end. As truthless, there was only one life he was forbidden to take. So that makes it sound like he personally holds killing as the greatest of sins, but the truthless don't. Like, and I don't even know anything about the truthless yet. Like, are they a people? Are they a vocation? Are they an elite assassin class? You know, whoever they are. You know, if there's only one life a truthless is forbidden to take, to me that means that then they do kill. But then he said that killing is the greatest of sins. And so it's like, how do you think killing is the greatest of sins if you belong to this group of people, the truthless, where you can kill anybody except yourself? So I'm sure that'll be explained later. There's 1,000 pages, over 1,000 to explain it in. But again, as a first-time reader reading the prologue, that stood out to me as like, somebody should have edited that paragraph. All right, so send me hate comments. It's fine. Like I said, full caveat, I am going to love this book. It's fine. I'm going to love it. But I am also kind of a jerk who's going to flag all the things that bug me about it as I go along. Which, and I know I mentioned Robert Jordan earlier, I will do the same thing with Robert Jordan. I'm in the middle of a reread and I'm reading A Crown of Swords and I am tallying all the annoying things because Robert Jordan repeats the same annoying things. So that's just the kind of reader I am. So, you know, I'm just throwing shade. It's fine, being nitpicky. But yeah, if you have any light to shed on any of the things that I just mentioned, let me know, or like where they might pop up later in the book. Try not to spoil though. I don't get hugely upset if things are spoiled, because actually reading it the way the author intended it to be read is like amazing, even if I know what's going to happen. But I'd still prefer not to have spoilers. But anyway, comment away. I'm sorry if you hate me, and I'll see you again with a future update. Good morning. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've been here before. I probably shouldn't have just said good morning. It's morning as I'm filming this, but I think I'm going to post it tomorrow afternoon, so it won't be morning when anybody potentially watches this probably. Anyway, I think this is the last snippet in my first vlog for Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings. I have just finished part 1, and I think what I'm going to try to do is do a vlog for each of the 5 parts of this book, because this is such a long book, although it's possible that I might do one vlog for a couple parts or something, just depending on how much is happening in those parts. But anyway, it's the end of part 1, so we've been introduced to some of the major characters, and so I wanted to just do this quick vlog about what I think about part 1. So far in part 1, we have had 2 kind of prologues or preludes, which I talked about in the first clip in this video. So one was a prelude to the entire series, the Stormlight Archive, of which this is the first book, and I really loved that prelude. And then the second prologue is a prologue just to this book, which I just had some issues with how detailed it was in the world building without giving us enough of a hook to really drag us into the story. And then we've had part 1 where we've been introduced to 2 of the main characters for, I assume, the entire series, unless they die or something. But we've been introduced to Kaladin and Shallan, who alternate chapters, so we alternate their points of view. And I like these characters quite a bit. Kaladin, at this point in the story, is an ex-soldier. He'd been fighting for kind of a local lord's army, and had really been loving it, had a lot of ambition, was having some success, and then we know that something happened, some sort of betrayal or misunderstanding perhaps, and he was sold into slavery, I think, by the people that he'd been fighting for. And then we've kind of followed some of his journey through slavery. And he's now gotten to a place called the Shattered Plains as part of a slave caravan, where he's been sold as a slave to kind of the much bigger army that's fighting a war that was kicked off by an event in the prologue of this book. So I'm assuming anybody who's watched this video either hasn't read The Way of Kings and is actually kind of interested in picking it up, which is why I'm going to be intentionally vague with the plot, because I don't want to give things away, especially with a book that relies so much on world building. People need to discover the world for themselves. And then if you've already read this book, you already know everything that I'm referencing, and what you're probably here for is less about my thoughts on the detailed plot, because lots of people have covered that, and more just my experience as a first reader entering this world for the first time. So anyway, that's why I'm gonna very much not do spoilers and even be kind of intentionally vague about details, because people have already covered those. So anyways, that's Kaladin, and then Shallan, I don't know even how I really pronounce it. I'm sure it varies. But Shallan is a kind of a noble family's daughter, but her family is kind of a very rural family. And her father, it sounds like, was kind of an irascible, very hard to get along with, potentially abusive sort of guy who kind of drove their noble house's finances into the ground. He has just died, and Shallan, but nobody knows, and this is not spoiling, this is setting up the story, and Shallan and all of her brothers are in a panic because their father owes so much money to people that if it's found out that he is dead, all the creditors will descend, and they're afraid that their house will just get wiped into oblivion because everything they own will be taken, and they might even be sold into slavery to satisfy their father's debts. So Shallan has come up with a brilliant scheme to leave home, and again, she's been a very sheltered, noble girl. She has no experience in the outside world. To leave home to try to convince one of the top female scholars in the world to take her on as kind of a ward and an apprentice. But the kicker is that Shallan doesn't necessarily want this woman's knowledge. She actually wants to steal a powerful magical artifact from her, because it's very similar to a powerful magical artifact that her father had that had been destroyed in kind of a magical event, I think gone wrong with her father. As part of kind of helping her family out. So it's a very desperate plan. And so we're following her as she tries to convince this woman to take her on as an apprentice. And so I just think the creation, Kaladin I'm less interested in right now, because I just feel like that's a pretty standard storyline. I don't mean standard to like denigrate it, like it's well done, but that's there's nothing particularly unusual in that. But I'm really liking Shallan's storyline so far. Just the idea of this totally sheltered young woman, but she's like educated herself because her family was so rural and her father was such an asshole that she didn't have kind of the tutors and like governess type people that other young noble women have, and so she's very impressively educated herself. So she just clearly has a lot of grit and determination and drive, came up with this incredibly daring and risky plan, and is actually so far successful at carrying it out. She's managed to follow this woman from city to city, because this woman travels a lot, and has finally gotten a hold of her and gotten at least some of the first steps out of the way towards kind of getting into this woman's confidences so she can steal this magical artifact. So I really like Shallan. So all of that said, well, okay, so first, just overall impressions of the book. I do really like this book. Continuing from here, or like if I had to do a rating from here, I'm expecting this book to be probably a 4-star book from me, and I'll get into why. The world building is the best thing about this book. The world building is incredible. It is imaginative and creative. The writing about the world building is mostly well done. Brandon Sanderson does a great job of kind of just immersing you in the environment. And so I've recovered from the prologue that I criticized earlier, where there were just way too many terms. That's still true of a lot of the history and politics in this book, which I'll go into in a second. But the actual just like natural world building is fantastic. So then the things that I don't like about this book that are making it a 4-star, despite my love of epic fantasy, are just overall, I'm still not impressed with the writing. Like I said, the world building is good, but the rest of the writing, I've got a couple issues. So first of all, just stylistically, as I said in some of my videos leading up to reading this book, and I think I opened this video with a comment on this, I do think Sanderson's writing is just kind of sterile and basic, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for a book to be something that I really fall in love with and get swept up in, it has to be more compelling. And the only compelling thing in this book so far is the world building. Just the style of the writing is not, like I'm not hooked. You know, I can put this down. I can read a few pages and then put it down and not feel sad, which with a 5-star book, that doesn't happen. So yeah, so stylistically, I think the style of the writing is basic and sterile. And, you know, I could like, especially towards the end of part 1, there were just many places where I just read a paragraph and just be like, seriously, this is like, it's very formulaic. So that's one thing. Then the other thing, I mentioned that the world building is done well, but to me, the handling of the history and the politics and that sort of part of the world building is actually not done well. So at this point, I'm almost 200 pages into the book, and there are everyday cultural things that have not been explained. And when you're building a fantasy world, obviously you're not going to explain every single little detail. And I definitely prefer writers who just kind of write just like what's happening without going into pages long explanations of like, oh, well, in this country they wear these clothes and this is what they look like, you know, and that sort of thing. But for example, one thing that comes up a lot in Shallan's chapters is, what is the deal with safe hands? why, like, so all the women have their left hand always covered. And Shallan kind of judges people for the way in which they're covered as a representation of class. There are specific ways that you gesture with your safe hand that indicate emotional states. So frustration, you use kind of the positioning and a gesture of your safe hand to ask for help from servants. So it's constant. And all we know is that it's religious. And I think, in it seems like in kind of a modesty sense. And I don't need a full page explanation. All I need is like a 5-word clause in a sentence where something is happening with a safe hand, where Brandon just says, I shouldn't call him by his first name, I don't know him, where Sanderson just says, like, safe hands, which are always covered because blah. Like, it's just come up so much, and every time I'm just like, ah! Just give me 5 words about the frickin' safe hands. Another thing similar to that is eye color. Like, we know so far, this comes up especially in Kaladin's chapters, that whether you have light eyes or dark eyes is a major signifier of like caste and class, and whether you're a full citizen of this society or not. Yeah, like, it's incredibly important. It's mentioned all the time, especially in kind of like an army hierarchy, because his chapters are in the army. And there's no, to me, I read it and I'm like, okay, racism. Like, this is, okay, easy. Racism is incredibly complex. And so just like with the safe hands, it's like, I need 5 words just telling me something about the origin of this. And so in 200 pages, with the number of times that the safe hands, and whether you're a light eyes or a dark eyes, or whether somebody Kaladin is interacting with or talking about is a light eyes or a dark eyes, the number of times it has come up, I should have had several of those little clauses, just as little breadcrumbs that just gradually illuminate more about the religion and the culture and the caste system and the politics that drive these two things. So, as you can tell, I'm emotional about this. This is not great writing for me. Other than that, I like the book. There's one more writing related thing. So there's one point towards the end of the Kaladin chapters. So Kaladin is in kind of an unusual situation because throughout the world there are all these little things called spren, and we don't know much about them yet. They're maybe part creatures, part energy or something, because they can kind of like literally disappear from any way that humans can sense them, but they're all around humans all the time in this world, and they exist for everything. So there are emotion spren, there are like anger spren, pain spren that kind of appear as like little sparks of light when people are feeling particularly strong emotions. Then there's some that are associated with the elements. So in Kaladin's case, he has a wind spren who has appeared to him and has been following him consistently, and we're told several times that that's weird. These are little creatures of some sort that are just really not supposed to have any kind of conscious personality. They're not. They don't have consciousness and emotion and things in the way that people do. But this wind spren seems to be, I don't want to say evolving, because that's something that happens over generations, but she is kind of like, first of all, she identifies as a she. She ends up saying that she has a name, and we know from Kaladin's surprise in these moments that that's incredibly unusual. And then she sticks around with him for a long time, and it's clearly the same one. And she's actually kind of a help to him. She's kind of noticing his emotional state and talking to him. Imagine Tinkerbell. And this is all very weird in the world that this is set in, but Kaladin is a slave. He has a lot of other stuff going on, so he's not thinking about it too much. So we're not thinking about it too much because we're in Kaladin's head. It's his point of view. But so at one point towards the end of his final chapters in part 1, the wind spren leaves him, and it's a very odd, rushed exchange. I just wanted to look at it for a second. So yeah, she just, kind of says out of the blue, she's like, I have to leave now. And he's like, please don't leave me, basically. And he says, I have these instincts. So she's just said, I'm going to leave you. I don't know what'll happen. I have these instincts, one of which tells me that if I leave you, I might lose myself. And so he's getting like worried about this and is like, don't go. But she's like, I have to. And why she has to is because she's emotionally invested in him. And at this point in his slavery experience, he's feeling a lot of despair and has almost given up on surviving it. And she says that she's been with him, you know, since he was like a great warrior, even though he didn't know about her at that point. Like I mentioned, Spren can be kind of outside of our human senses, and she didn't appear to him in a form he could recognize until later. So she says, I can't watch you be totally lost like this when I've seen how great you can be. And then she's like, I have to leave. And that kind of makes sense, but it's the tiniest little paragraph, and it's just like emotional, and like there's a lot going on, and it's like very deep. And so some of those, so that moment was rushed. And then in general, in that particular chapter of Kaladin, when he's really going through like hopefully the worst period of his life, but like a really bad period of his life, it just all felt very rushed and like surface level of these incredibly deep emotions that he must be going through. And, you know, it does make sense. Like Sanderson is a white man trying to write about the experience of someone in slavery. It is not something that Sanderson or, you know, any of his people, you know, the particular way that he experiences, for example, American culture, you know, and the people that he's descended from, like none of them have experienced that. And so not only does it sort of make sense, it's also like, really, maybe he shouldn't necessarily be writing about experiences of people in slavery, but it's also like there's so much material to draw from that I'm still just like, why wasn't that chapter written better? Anyway, and so, yeah, so that moment where this wind Spren, I think her name is Silfrena or something like that, left Kaladin was just, it all just felt very abrupt and rushed. That whole emotional sequence of Kaladin really hitting his rock bottom. So yeah, and then one other incredibly minor point is I love maps in fantasy books, and we get many maps in this book. And so one that I found myself referencing a lot was a map of the total world or the continent. So you can kind of see it's very complex. There are lots of countries. And so he would mention a nationality or a country, and I would come back to this and look at it. One land or country that got referenced a lot is called Natanatan. And it seems kind of important because it seems to be the place maybe where the Parshendi, the group that everybody's at war with in part 1 of this book, it seems to be maybe where they come from. Wasn't entirely clear on that, but it's not on the map. The only thing on the map is New Natanan, which is an island. And, you know, I've like scoured the map looking for it and I don't see it. So it could be that it's like just off the map or something, but there's no, it's just, this happens so much with fantasy books where somebody puts so much time and effort into the map and so many people presumably check it, and then it doesn't quite match up with where the text is. You know, things in the text end up having a lot of importance that you wish you could see on the map, and you can't. So I'm a little confused about Natanatan, if it like doesn't exist anymore for something or for some reason, or if it's off the map because it's shrouded in perpetual fog and is out of the knowledge of people living in this world at this time. Like that should be indicated on the map, you know, the like, here there be dragons sort of thing. And it's not. So that's like very nitpicky, but it's like, given how much is represented on the map and how helpful it can be, I was disappointed by that. So anyway, I think I've talked way too long, and that is all of my thoughts on part 1 of The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. So again, despite me ranting about it, I am enjoying this book. I think it'll probably be a 4-star book for me. It's possible that as I get more invested in the characters, it'll bump up, but for now, it's a 4-star book. I'm enjoying it. I'll definitely finish it. Still got a ways to go. So, yeah, let me know if you liked this vlog, doing it part by part, since these parts are long. And let me know your thoughts about this book if you've read it or if you're interested in reading it. All right, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye.